I think I've always wanted to be a teacher, for as long as I can remember. When I look back at my childhood memories, I was always that one very curious child who loved learning about everything and was always very motivated to learn new things. As I became older, I also enjoyed helping my classmates when they struggled with something, and I had this amazing feeling of satisfaction right after when I realized that I was able to help someone, and consequently, they were very happy and motivated because now they understood something or were able to solve a problem that before they couldn't do. Even though I've always known I wanted to become a teacher, it wasn't until I enrolled in university that I realized how important the teaching profession is. As a result of the courses I've taken, the numerous reflexive discussions and conversations I've had with my peers, the teaching practice periods, the teachers I have met, and my exchange period in Finland, among others, I now have a more consolidated meaning of the teaching profession and its importance. Although it is important, now I know that teaching goes further from the personal satisfaction of helping others grow. Education is important because of its social function, which includes empowering each student to achieve their own level of excellence, promoting the development of adequate competences for them to be active, autonomous, and critical citizens, and reducing social differences as much as possible, among many other functions that education has. And that is especially important when talking about teaching English. I have had many people ask me how I learned English because they didn't have a good experience learning English at school. In my case, I have to say that in my family, learning foreign languages is considered very important. I remember my grandfather who sent all his kids to French school in Barcelona so they learned a foreign language from a very young age, always telling me that learning foreign languages is very important because he had to travel to Germany often for work, and he felt very bad when he wasn't able to communicate with people he met and the locals. On the other side of the family, my dad has always talked about how important learning English is. He always says how his mother made a huge effort and asked for a loan to pay for his English lessons when he was a teenager, because they were a very humble and pretty poor family. So, when I was a kid, I was lucky enough to have extracurricular English lessons since the age of 6. I have often seen that children who have these help after school do better, but not everyone has access to that. As I said earlier, education has a social purpose. This is why I decided to become an English teacher. One of my main goals as a future English teacher is to empower every child to learn and use foreign languages in their present and their future. So, in order to achieve that, it is essential to approach foreign language teaching from the principles of communicative language teaching. The ultimate goal of this approach is that students develop their communicative competence, which is aligned with the capacity and competence-based approach of the early years and primary education curriculums, respectively. In the CLT classroom, us teachers create contextualized, meaningful communicative situations where using the foreign language has a purpose. Therefore, the target language, in our case that's English, is purposefully used in interaction with others. Through these kind of activities, we overcome the limitations of the grammar translation methods, which is what I often see as a private tutor of secondary school students. They all know the structure of some tenses and they know some words in English, but they're not able to express or understand a message. What they have done at school has given them some knowledge, but they have not been able to develop their communicative competence. And therefore, when they hear something about English, they just feel rejection, they feel very frustrated. Even though we're talking about ELT methodologies, there are some concepts about learning in general that we must consider when teaching all fields of knowledge because they are inherent to learning. In this case, I'll talk about two of them. On the one hand, there is motivation. It's key that English teachers base their work on the students' interests. That means that they should have a child-centered approach. They should also explore the students' prior knowledge and create motivating activities based on active methodologies. On the other hand, we must consider Vygotsky's ZDP. It is extremely important to determine the initial level of competence of our students because that will allow us to carefully select, adapt, and create the activities and materials that learners need to complete a task successfully. This means that the tasks teachers propose must have the right amount of challenge. They cannot be too easy or too difficult because that will result in demotivation. For all these reasons, teaching is a very complex activity, as we all know by now. But it is particularly hard when teaching a foreign language because the content is very unknown for pupils. And they can also be very diverse in terms of their competence level. Nevertheless, in my opinion, it is essential that all English teachers take all these factors into account so students can develop their communicative competences in foreign language learning. Indeed, it is important so they become willing to learn the language. They find it purposeful and enjoy the experience. That is the key to avoiding outcomes such as what I stated earlier, where students who aren't able to communicate in the foreign language, who are embarrassed to read or even say something because they feel uncomfortable, and ultimately they are students who have rejected the language. So, considering how students learn a foreign language, what should teachers do to support this process? I have come up with a list of 10 items that good EFL teachers should always keep in mind. Number 1, explore the student's prior knowledge and interests beforehand. This allows teachers to promote motivation and design a contextualized, competence-based plan that is adequate for the student's interests and needs. Next is analyze the adequacy of activities and materials with your own criteria and considering the learning outcomes. In the EFL classroom, teaching materials and activities help the teacher promote understanding of both the content that's being taught and the language that we are using to do that. So choosing adequate materials to work with helps the children and the teacher. Otherwise, they work against the teaching objectives, which causes confusion, frustration, and demotivation. Number 3 is scaffold according to the ZDP. As I have previously stated, this will help the teacher propose activities that are challenging at the right level. In addition, educators can provide the language support that is just what pupils need to complete a task successfully. When they can do something challenging by themselves just with the right amount of support, their motivation is boosted. Next up is promote language usage. One of the biggest challenges, I think, of learning a foreign language only at school is that the number of hours devoted to this is very limited. Therefore, teachers should make the most of our English time to develop the foreign language skills. This means we should maximize the exposure to the language and promote interactive activities where using the language is actually useful, following the principles of the communicative language teaching approach. Number 5 is reflect in and on action. Reflection is what provides information for self-assessment, which is key for self-improvement. Therefore, teachers should reflect in and on action systematically. Next, teachers should work hand in hand with class teachers. Being an English teacher can be hard because we spend a limited amount of time with students, so we might not be aware of everything that's happening. Consequently, communication and teacher collaboration is essential. Number 7 is be inclusive. Following the principles of inclusive education, teachers should observe and reflect to identify the barriers for learning and participation in their classes, as well as proposing changes to overcome these. We must always remember that diversity is a natural fact. We must not change students that don't fit into the school or our teaching. We must change the ladder to make it accessible for everyone. Number 8 is practice lifelong learning. Keeping up with the latest research, following other teachers on social media, and participating in training programs is a nice way of being up to date and having references for improvement. However, we must remind ourselves that we should introduce those strategies, techniques, materials, or methodologies that make sense with what we're teaching and with what our students need. Doing something just because it's trendy or because we like it is not a good enough reason. Second to last is take English outside class time. As I said in number 4, we should maximize the exposure to the language. And what better way to do that than taking English outside of our class time? English is a language. We use languages to communicate constantly. So why should the English language be restricted to communicating in the English class? We can get other teachers involved in using materials in English for their lessons, and we can also encourage families to participate, for instance, by using rhymes. In the school, we are the experts in teaching English, so advocating for that is in our hands. And last but not least, acknowledge how hard it is to learn a foreign language. We might not remember because we have a good command of the English language now. However, learning a foreign language is a huge challenge. So we should put ourselves in our pupils' shoes and try our best to make the language accessible for them, keeping in mind the ZDP.